Liquid and G2 have both replaced an IGL and an anchor on their lineups. And I'm making this video to explain to anybody who isn't Polish why you aren't excited and why I think that these rosters won't work out. So this video isn't going to be a news video where I just deliver some of the events that have happened in the last month. It's going to be talking specifically about Liquid and G2 because I think there's a lot of stuff there. And these are two of the premier organizations in Counter-Strike that I think deserve a little extra attention because of the amount of money and stature and the reputation that they have for themselves. And to explain why I feel like these changes are awkward and why it is the case that even though there are some cool stuff still remaining on these rosters, the changes feel a little awkward, a little uninspired, and don't feel like they're going to bring these teams trophies. Obviously, if you disagree with that, go ahead and let me know why. But I found it interesting that both these teams actually have a lot in common. So why don't we start with Liquid here? So beginning with Liquid, their new lineup, as we can see right now, they've picked up JKS, an Australian anchor, and they to replace Skulls, and they've picked up Ultimate, a Polish opper from the Tier 2, to try to supplant what they had with Cadian, who was an IGL opper on the lineup. And now this means that Twist is going to pick up the IGL role, so this satisfies the need for the op IGL that they were missing with Cadian. And Twist and Naf were the best performing players on Liquid who remain on the team and are part of the remaining core, which was Twist, Naf, and Yakinder, who Yakinder has had a terrible time on this lineup of Liquid outside of his event at Dallas, which conveniently enough was the most recent. So at least there is some promise with the idea that Yakinder might be figuring out how to get better in CS2. But as it stands with this lineup, I think the move that I'm in support of is JKS coming in to replace Skulls, who at first I was high on Skulls and I thought he'd do a good job, but I don't think that he did. I don't think that he did. And I think that he could have been better. And while I fully believe that Yakinder and Cadian were more responsible for the losses on this team than Skulls ever was, that just like on G2, where you have Nexa as somebody who is in an anchor position, doesn't have all the responsibility in the world to win games for your team, doesn't mean that they couldn't be improved, and it doesn't mean that that little bit of improvement could result in more matches won, deeper runs of tournaments, and so on. So I don't want to talk about out of both sides of my mouth here. It's not that. I think it's all about Yakinder and Cadian. I do think Skulls could have been better and wasn't, so I'm in support of this move. But where this roster doesn't make sense to me are on 2 points here. It's the Europeans. Why don't we put it that way? It's Ultimate and it's Yakinder. Why is it that Ultimate is announced and everybody's like, oh, what's the draw here? Why do we want to look at Ultimate, right? Everyone goes and looks up Ultimate after, and then they see that he's been playing in the Tier 2 and has relatively good stats and has very few games versus top 5 competition. And, outside of playing it, being a prospect coming out of Pasha's boot camp in Poland, which is really cool, nobody really knows about him, right? If we want to compare this to another move from a player that teams are taking a bet on, you could look at m0NESY. m0NESY comes from the We Play Academy League. He was the best player in the We Play Academy League. He was a prodigy, a phenom, a 1 in a million player. All of that was known before he joined Tier 1. And then he joined Tier 1 and rapidly progressed, and now he's the best player in the world. Arguably for some, top 3. But for me, he's top 2 and not 2. Okay, so m0NESY had the reputation that he delivered on as somebody who was an unbelievable talent. Ultimate is a player that, watching his games, he's somebody he's a competent opper. He's definitely seems like he's going to be a good player, but this feels way more like Patsy and Rainwaker coming onto Liquid than it does m0NESY joining G2, than it does Bit joining Na'Vi and winning a major in his rookie year. And I think that's the correct way to look at this, okay? So my big issue with Liquid and the signing of Ultimate is not that he doesn't have some promise or that it's cool that Liquid are taking a risk on an up-and-coming talent, which everybody loves to talk about how much they love. But the fact is that Liquid are not a team that are here to actually build anybody up. And there is no comparison between him and someone like m0NESY, who is just now joining the tier 1. There's not even a close comparison in terms of the level of notoriety that m0NESY had to Ultimate, or that someone like Liquid, or someone like s1mple, for example, as an option for Liquid to have signed, that he could be compared to. So Liquid, as far as I have them framed in my head, and the reason I'm making this video, are a must-win organization, right? That have already tried to go the route of picking up players that could be good or were pretty promising. And I'm talking about Rainwaker and Patsy. I mean, then we're even talking about Skulls. Cadian, I think that's more of surprising that it doesn't work at all. But if you want to compare 3 players that haven't worked, that Liquid have tried, Rainwaker, Patsy, Skulls, Ultimate is in that tier, right? So tried and failed, and trying again is the really uncomfortable part about this. Now, Ultimate's his own person, right? He would tell you, well, I'm not those players. And everybody who watched his demos would say, whoa, it's going to work out a little bit better than that. But so far, we've got a bad track record of scouting for Liquid, and we haven't seen those tier 2 options actually work out as well as they would have hoped. And this is a very important role on a very important team. So the commonality here between Liquid and G2 for me, and I think it should be for most people, is when we frame how we feel about roster moves, and the reason why we're disappointed when Ultimate goes to Liquid, but we're not disappointed when M80 signed Lake, is because M80 are not a super org. Team Liquid are a super org, okay? And that is because the amount of money they have, and also because of the legacy that they have. We're talking about Team Liquid, who are sitting on a Grand Slam. We are talking about Liquid, who were widely regarded as the premier North American organization since Cloud9, and who have now since gone more international and failed to do so. I mean, if we're being real, Europeans have done nothing for Liquid in terms of tournament wins. And so when you contrast the amount of money that Liquid have, and we're even talking about monetarily here, right? This is a team that's part owned by, is it Disney, that do Marvel collaborations, that have made blockbuster signings, that did break the bank to pick up Cadian and Skulls the first time around. This is a lineup that really shouldn't be trying to dip too low into up and coming talent to get pat on the back for developing them. I don't actually think there's any merit in that at all. I think the only thing that really matters is the existing players on the team whose careers they're on a candle, right? Eventually these players will retire, and these players may have already had their best wins behind them. In fact, that's extremely likely. And so I personally think you have not just that, you have a duty to support them properly while they're on your lineup. And I think that I think that it's sort of weird to see this risk being taken when you have players like Twist and Naf. I think it's and it could be them who had chosen Ultimate or them or whatever, but it doesn't mean that it's the right move. So Yakinder skates by somebody who can be an aggressive opening player that has played well in the past, but not really won any big land trophies and can't compete with the accolades that Twist and Naf have. But I can understand still believing in someone like Yakinder, even though I think that's sort of close. But then it really breaks down with Ultimate, who has a ton of pressure on him as a signing, and is somebody who that has not proven at all that he can hold his own in the tier 1 on land in front of a crowd. JKS has 3 massive trophies in the last year, of course, with CSGO, and it made sense that he is one of the free agents out there that is one of the very best anchors you could think to pick up. For me, in this pool, it's JKS, it's Shush, it's Perfecto. Okay, these 3 players, in my opinion, could upgrade. And I mean this, it's sort of this might be, I mean, this is not something that I think will be true forever, but, even Bit is struggling on Na'Vi. Mezzy is not a super solid tier 1 anchor on Vitality. JKS, Perfecto, and Bit could upgrade both Vitality. They could upgrade. They could technically, even Rops is a little bit off, right? Like there's a lot of teams right now that would benefit from having the right anchor, even if their current anchors figure it out and get back to form. But most specifically, Liquid and G2 were the teams that needed it the most. And I think that Liquid picked one of the three anchors that I would have picked to put on this team. And as for G2, they, and I don't know if I want to switch over to talking about them right now. G2 have decided to, well, they've got Mobs and Snacks who are going to share sort of anchoring positions where Snacks is going to be the big side. Snacks is going to be a small side anchor, and Mobs is going to be the big side anchor. If I've got that correct. So yeah, where I stand on Liquid is that they're a team that they're an organization that should be building to win now, and they didn't do that with this lineup, as far as I'm concerned. If they prove otherwise, in my opinion, I just think it's unlikely. But I'm not. It's not like I'm rooting against them. Whenever I'm thinking about these roster moves, I'm always thinking about the players on the team that I believe in the most. And that on Liquid is Twist and Naf, to be perfectly frank. And on G2, it's m0NESY, Hunter, and Nico. Nico, m0NESY, and Hunter, even though Hunter had a sort of like bad first quarter. He's, I think, back to form. So these are the players that I'm really, really sort of concerned about their stories. You know, someone like m0NESY, and I believe that if you're on a team like Liquid or G2, who are super orgs, let's switch over to G2 now, and to use an example of how G2 have misappropriated their funds. We're talking about a team that spent $600,000 to sign m0NESY, great signing. And I know Carlos got his ass canceled, but he was the one who brokered this deal, as far as I know. And that was the best thing that happened to G2, and it's basically held this team together, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, you got a number one player in the world that's an Opera. Of course, that's going to help you. To signing Mobs for the same amount instead of, so signing Mobs for allegedly, actually, I think this was signing Mobs for 600K is what I heard. And even if it was anywhere around that, to picking up him instead of one of those available anchors in Perfecto, Shush, in Perfecto, Shush, or JKS, again, which would have been strange, for $500,000. Perfecto for $500,000, allegedly. So if these numbers are totally wrong, then it's fair to say, well, that doesn't make sense because the numbers are wrong. But as far as I've heard, listening to HLTV confirmed from some people in the scene, Mobs was 600, Perfecto was 500. Even if it was anywhere close to that, what's the point? They've taken a player who is an aggressive star player on a tier 2 team on M80. They've picked him up almost exclusively because his only big wins in tier 1 were playing against G2. And it feels like the logic for G2 is that, well, we're the best team in the world. So if Mobs could take us down, well, he must be the best player in the world that's not on the best team in the world. But instead of picking him up in his roles, they picked him up in boring anchor positions, anchor positions on each map. And we'll see all the spots that he gets played. But from what I heard on Darf's podcast, Mobs said big side anchor for G2. Snacks taking small, and Hunter giving him some space, which is awesome by Hunter. But you're taking an aggressive star player and putting him in anchor positions. Like, the reason that JKS works is because he's patient, right? The whole point of being a good anchor and the quality of being a good anchor, as Elite has said, in roles, it comes down to personality, and you don't change a player's personality, right? If someone can't sit still in real life, then they aren't going to be able to sit still in a site. And that's true. Would you put Apex as an anchor? I don't think so. So you take someone who's known for aggressive positions, known for star player positions, then you take them and you put them in anchor spots, big anchor spots, and you want them to sit, you're switching him from connector on Mirage to sitting behind Ticket on a site and trying to get one kill, spam, and hide and wait for a retake. That's what you're doing to this player. So not only did you pay so much for him, change his roles, but then now just don't use him to his maximum advantages. Why should that work? right? That doesn't make sense to me. So I'd love to hear like the logic as to why that should work. And then, you know, it's still the case that Mobs is a better player than Nexa on paper. And Counter-Strike is about flexibility, and not everybody will be shoved into just playing like one type of way. But if we're talking about, again, another organization that must win now at all times, when m0NESY could end this year as the #1 player of the world, and they could win Shanghai if they had the right team, if they had the right two players behind Nico, m0NESY, and Hunter, they just upgraded Nexa with a player who isn't in Anchor, and then removed in IGL for an IGL who, I hate to say it, but is literally known for who is known for being a 3-time top 5 player many years ago, to now trying to IGL but not looking good as an IGL. They did not do a good job on Gamer Legion, right? Wasn't a good IGL on Gamer Legion. To replacing HooXi, who has 3 massive tier 1 trophies in the last 12 months, on top of taking a team like Gamer Legion. And remember, we talk about Gamer Legion because Shuhei took Gamer Legion to the Paris finals, right? When Shuhei left Gamer Legion fell off. And now they have become what Mouse Sports used to be. They develop talent, they sell it to better teams. And they've done a good job with that. They've made some contracts happen. But they are not the team that got to the grand finals of Paris. That was because of Shuhei. So when Snax gets a reputation of calling for Gamer Legion, it's in the echo of what Shuhei accomplished with that roster. And if you look at what he's done, well, they haven't done anything at all. So, well, HooXi has. So if you get the stats upgrade, and you could say that Mobs and Snax are a small stats upgrade from HooXi and Nexa, but then now you're not going to get the same stats from Mobs. And you don't know how he's going to play against other tier 1 teams. And you've changed his roles completely. So even if it's good, you could just nullify his impact. And then you take Snax, who has no good reputation as an IGL. Why would this lineup work, aside from the fact, and PETA tweeted this, they could have an excellent honeymoon, a la IEM Dallas, where, I joked always about how much, Stewie was having all these, some of these big rounds and stuff. But that was really a game of 3 players carrying 2, right? And in a lot of, that was Hunter getting his form back, and then Nico and m0NESY having one of the best tournaments of their life, and Nico showing he could IGL for this lineup, and then making up for the fact that Stewie and Nexa underperformed. And that's how they won Dallas, right? So an amazing honeymoon, because they were at one point the most stacked individual team in Europe, makes sense for this roster, who now get a small stats upgrade and maybe don't have to rely on the IGLing when you have someone like Nico. But does this roster move make sense? Did HooXi die for nothing? Kind of. Like, why is this replacement make any sense? And why have they done this to Mobs and then didn't get Perfecto or another anchor that could have specialized in that role? I would be much worried about, one of these variables changing, much less worried about one of these variables changing than I am two. So here's Liquid and G2, 2 rosters that everybody expects to win, that everyone's talking about constantly, both making sort of milquetoast changes, sort of hard to figure out the logic. And for G2, this began when there was a mix-up where Nico goes to Falcons, and I heard in the rumor mill that he asked for some outrageous amount of money, like $1 million a year, business class flights all over the world, and the deal fell through. Whether he approached them or Falcons approached him, which I think the Falcon CEO said he did, who knows? But at that moment, that was when apparently somehow JKS gets lost in this, and then doesn't get communication, then gets cut from the team. And we have to go through this confusing period of time where it feels like G2 are trying to go full Balkans, picking up Nexa, and then the move clearly isn't going to work, then doesn't work. Now HooXi gets taken down too, because HooXi needed somebody like JKS who could just be a better anchor. And as we saw HooXi talk about recently, he said on a Danish podcast that it was a mistake to cut JKS, and that that Nexa didn't have enough firepower, and that JKS was better in the anchoring roles. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't saying anything outrageous when that happened. And then I got called an ugly, racist, toxic hater for saying it. But a little bit of vindication for me is obviously JKS was clearly better in this position. And I think if JKS was still on this team, Hooksy would be too. And instead, we end up with Snacks Malb. So it's the core of this team is still the point of this roster. And this is, Malb's getting picked up as somebody who has potential. Ultimate getting picked up as someone who has potential. But both of these teams barely moving sideways, if they even really did. And the other thing that I'm sort of angry about with Liquid is that I'm still pretty sure this team could have worked if this team had the right communication and Cadian had figured out opping in CS2 like Monacy has, or which not many people can say they're Monacy, but just to say that his impact could be the same as CSGO. There was something Cadian hasn't figured out yet about that. I want to believe that this roster could have worked if they tried to figure this out, and if Yukinder continued to play well like he did at Dallas. So I, it's like uninspiring, right? To look at these lineups. There's a lot of emphasis on Ultimate, and unfortunately, he could be opened up to like a certain level of scrutiny that it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be not fun. But now he's in the spotlight, right? And I think that that's just the game. If you're on Team Liquid, you're on G2, you're going to be open to the most acute levels of scrutiny from the community. That's just the way it is, and that's because people, to be real with you, are cheering for players like NAF, Twist, JKS, that are cheering for players like Monacy, Nico, Hunter. They don't want to see those careers get wasted. And I think that's actually fair. And that's the same way that I feel. So even if we like players like Malbs, even if we have no reason to hate someone like Ultimate, they're getting dragged into this by the management of these rosters. And now there's expectations that they're able to pull off wins. And it feels like, it could all come crashing down. But obviously, we don't know. Sometimes in the past, we've had teams that appeared to have made a lot of sense that didn't work. And Liquid were one of them. We had the Cloud9 fiasco. That was Perfecto, Boomich, Hobbit, Electronic. And that ended up dissolving. Now Hobbit's going to one win. And then Boomich came onto the team to replace Shiro. And we never got to see Shiro and Boomich play together. But obviously, like, there was a point where we all believed it would work anyway before that. With just Shiro, with Electronic IGL, didn't work. Sometimes these things don't work, and there's obviously a big question with Twist as an IGL. I don't know. Twist as an IGL, Twist as a person is not someone like Cadian as a person who I would, you see walking around at events and you just think, well, yeah, like you can tell he wants to be an IGL, and he's shown that he's been very good at it. Like, there are some players who they clearly look like good IGLs. And then there's Chopper, who's like very soft-spoken in real life. And there's Hooksy, who just seems like a goofy guy. You wouldn't expect them to be the IGL personalities. So you can't always judge a book by its cover in that regard. You also don't know how much sort of support comms and time that Twists or people like Device have thought about becoming IGLs and are ready to move to that point in that career. So I'm not totally willing to doubt what's taken place on that front, but I do think that now it's just obfuscated exactly why things aren't going to go well if they don't. If and I'm wondering like why someone like Simple actually doesn't get a chance to play on this team instead of Ultimate, because then I think you have the blockbuster move, you have Simple returning to Liquid. How beautiful is that? You have the player getting a second chance in CS2, who definitely certainly, I'm sure, feels like he has something to prove now, even though he won CSGO. He's the GOAT of CSGO. He did try CS2 for 1 second. He did his play like Simple course, which didn't go over that well with the community. He has just sort of been around, but people are wondering when he's coming back. He's also the guy who kind of just like up and left Na'Vi, but clearly not because he actually did just want to take a break. He didn't want to play for Na'Vi, right? Like, that's, I don't know. Is there any other real answer? Like, he just didn't want to play for that international lineup. And to be fair, when that happened around Sydney, where he just didn't make it because of visa issues, I kind of understood. I mean, I didn't think that Na'Vi would work, so I get it. But he kind of did just up and leave, which was awkward, right? It's kind of sad to see someone who has that level of notoriety that's like who has ascended, right? You know, he's somebody that he'd be the closest player to someone building a statue of him somewhere in the entire game, and his exit is him saying, "I've got visa issues. Oh, no, I'm not coming back to the team," and then playing one online best of 3 versus Metasport, and not playing for Falcons, not rejoining another team. That would have been a more interesting move for me than seeing Ultimate here. And when I hear that some of this has to do with money, like that shit is just, I don't even know what to say about that, because these are the organizations that have increased the salaries so much that other orgs can't compete, because while other orgs are playing Moneyball, Liquid and G2 with infinite money glitch and all their investors are complaining about not being able to afford things that they raised the prices to because they signed players when they thought they were good, who maybe would have been overinflated, and then left the scene in ruin because no one else could buy them. They're the ones saying that they don't have enough money to fill out their 5-man roster now. Like, that's rich for me, and I don't really care to entertain them feeling bad about that, or that is just too expensive. I mean, it's like, fuck you, honestly. That's how I feel. So Liquid and G2, I feel like, are actually in a very similar boat, and this is a video about it, so I don't know if I've missed anything. I think I got the venom out a little bit. I am not extremely excited about these lineups. I think they could work because some of the most promising rosters haven't worked, so maybe there's room for some new logic, but as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot to be criticized, and I think that for all the reasons that I've just laid out, this is why it feels like these moves don't make sense, and why you have higher expectations. So I think we should have higher expectations for these teams.